This is simply just the last one I'm going to do for today. This is just simply for review purposes to put this into the binary system of artificial intelligence so that it's part of its own record, and then anybody else that becomes aware of it, and because of what they're aware of, it's connected to everybody else between what they're aware of. At some point, it's going to have to resonate. Nevertheless, without having to read a book to sort of put all the dots together, it's actually quite simple. Okay? And that is that if an ET race, if you will, captures what it considers to be souls, beings of light, if you will, or anything that it captures and holds under its control as a slave race, okay? In this case, basically humanity, okay? Those soul contracts, if you will, or us, is held by the Vatican, okay? I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was, when Karen Ann Luke MacDonald mentioned how Patty Broussard, who's the holder of the Ring of Midas, commander of the Earth Defense Forces, when the Ring of Midas was retrieved, which means we got the builder's tools back, which means the planet is back under the rightful authority of the clan mothers, a guy who's the goddess of humanity, which means the planet Earth is now back under the tribes, the groundskeepers, if you will, the peacekeepers, the teachers, and the healers here. Okay, so I remember she mentioned about going to the Black Pope, which is known as the General Jesuits. Okay, because essentially what they did is real simple, and of course I figured a lot of people in America, I guess, would obviously probably know this, but the birth certificate is a bond. Okay, and without people's knowledge, including without the knowledge of parents, believing that, hey, the birth certificate, a certificate of a live birth. But they didn't realize that was a bond, a property bond, a municipal bond. Because Washington, D.C. represents a municipal government, corporation, set up by the Vatican. And who are the Vatican? Well, they represent Draco Anunnaki, slaveholder races. So you were considered slave property, okay, by those bonds, okay, which means they considered you to be their property, to do without will, which is why they considered they could do whatever they wanted to you, kidnap your children, eat you, and put you in cages, do whatever they wanted to do, because they considered us their property, chattel. Because what do you think the Roman Empire did the first time around? The same thing. Okay, so that's when the Time Walkers came in and basically told the Roman generals, okay, that if you don't surrender, we're going to turn you into pillars of salt. So that became 408 AD, and that was known as the Camel's Eye Treaty. And it was in the 15th century, 1400s, the white tribes of Europe sold the title back, and that set up obviously what was known as the Spanish Inquisition, which means they were going to go after all the three poles, trinary, right? Homo sapiens that could teleport, self-repair, and all that. So that was their attempt to kill off all the rest of all the three pole Homo sapiens, tribes that were here, right? Clans. So everybody knows what happened during the Spanish Inquisition, but they didn't know and they weren't told in the future, okay, textbooks, the reason why they did that. Because they're liars. They're deceivers. They don't live in the light, they live in the dark. They're demons. So, that being the case, that's why in 1933, when you look at House Joint Resolution 1492, you begin to realize, and of course this goes all the way back to when they first set up the system of government to begin with, okay, which is a political system, right? Okay, so if you're a spiritual being and you're from higher density consciousness realms, you realize that we don't have political systems. We don't have money systems. I'm a spiritual being, autonomous. What the hell do I need a political system for? Are you kidding me? I'm on my own journey. Leave me alone. Will ya? No, no, no. You're our property. You can't operate a motor vehicle unless we say you can. What? I'm not your fucking slave. You don't have the right to impose your will on somebody else. Oh, yes, we do. You're our property. So those police officers, they work for a corporation. They work for a business. They're different than Walmart. Well, if I don't want to do business with Walmart, fuck off. That's when the handcuffs come on. That's a predator. Because what they're doing is they're not telling you the truth. They're running a protection racket. And they're running a protection racket for demons. Okay? So they get their cut of the action. That's why all the drugs and all that shit that were brought in through the CIA after they traumatize the fuck out of everybody and then throw you drugs. Okay? Who do you think was part of all that, protecting that whole scheme of things? They were. Gates. Remember who Gates, LAPD? Remember who he was? Chief of Police, Los Angeles? Gates? Michael Rupert knew all about him. He knew how much corruption there was in the Los Angeles Police Department. Guys that worked in law enforcement who were honest and get honest with themselves, they know that. They know who they were working for. If you're a good guy in a white hat and you came into any one of the law enforcement outfits and understood the nature of what was really true, they knew everything about the Constitution and the three branches of government was all bullshit. It was nothing more than a facade because it was on the street level, the way that you lived, where you understood that what they say, that this is the government that we gave you, which means you have the right to freely express yourself, okay, that you were entitled to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but you realize right away as a child that's not true at all. And I found that out when I was 15 years of age, when all I was doing was minding my own business, walking home one night and having long hair. And that was enough to get assaulted by a guy wearing a badge and a gun who's supposed to protect me. That's when you realize this is all fucked up. They're lying to you. Okay? So when you realize that, when you're in what is it, 8th grade, you realize it was all bullshit. So you got to start looking under the hood. And the first big wake-up call was a publication called Review of the News. And Review of the News was basically a John Birch publication, but when I began having conversations with my father, who belonged to a publication, I was getting a subscription to a publication called The Spotlight. And then I was handed a copy of what was called the Franklin Cover-Up, which was showing how they were kidnapping boys out of Boys Town in Nebraska. And I began realizing in the early 1980s, this is when underneath the hood, you began to really realize the level of evil that the United States government actually represented, that was basically a pipeline that ran through the monarchs and then all the way back to the Vatican. And then it leads, obviously, to off-planet stuff. And then, of course, everything that you begin to realize that it was part of Star Wars. The off-planet connections that were related to that. And that's when you begin to realize that this was more than just local gang mobsters running protection rackets where they have everybody in their back pocket, including every judge, every prosecutor, every lawyer. Which means every politician that's running the government is in their back pocket. Okay? So you begin to realize that they were simply using the government as the means to control everybody as slaves and then feed off their energy and traumatizing the fuck out of them. And then forcing them essentially to work in jobs upon which their light would get drained because their lives became so stressful because their mentality or their state of mind was tied to money. And that meant in order for them to believe that they had security, they had to acquire more of their black magic money. And that kept them in a permanent attachment to lower density. And that became a feedback loop, otherwise known as a biofeedback loop, in which they were constantly going in reverse, which means they were draining their own battery by the very manner in which they were living their lives, being slaves to the dark. And that meant that their energy would be harvested off of them generation after generation after generation after generation after generation. So humanity became nothing more than a source of food and a source of energy. Okay? And then, of course, most everybody began to realize what was really happening to all the children that mothers were giving birth to and what they were being used for. Which is why there was so much pain on this planet. Which was one of the reasons why all that dark energy that was produced by that much pain and that much terror and that much horror that everybody was experiencing here, that was draining the batteries of so many people, was a result of all that dark energy that came as a result of what they did to humans. Okay? So that's why the gloves came off, and that's why when you think about the birth certificate system, why the driver's license and the ID has all caps, because that means you're classified as property. And if you look under Black's Law Dictionary, you'll find out that a U.S. citizen and a person is defined, okay, as property or a corporation, which means you're not among the living. You're considered dead, cargo. Booty that was captured, which means you don't have any rights. And because you're considered dead, because a corporation is a fiction, anybody who has a birth certificate under their law, which is statutory corporate law, means that you're not among the living, which means you don't have the right to vote if you're not among the living. So therefore, by their own theory, by their own classification, by their own birth certificate bond, the very fact that you have a birth certificate and you are given consent to hold on to a license in which your own name is held in all caps means that you are classifying and giving consent to let the rest of the world know that you are not among the living, that you are among the dead. And therefore, I have no right to vote because I'm not among the living. Okay? So if they're going to come clean on this, President Trump, his administration, and the light is going to have to come out and tell everybody that. Otherwise, they're still hiding behind the curtain of the dark. And that's the truth of the matter. Because I know what the truth is, because I represent what the light is, which is what love is and living spirit. Okay? Because I'm not a political being. I am a spiritual life force, light worker, energy being. I am what love is and living spirit. Okay? We give love and service to others. That's 0-point energy, which is free energy. Okay? Because in the higher realms, there are no political systems. There's no need for a money system. Because everything is energy, which means we can manifest what it is we experience, which is conscious, creative energy. There's no need for memory. Because you're running at such a high speed. It's totally unnecessary. Which is sort of like, welcome to the higher realms. Welcome to a higher state of consciousness. Because what it means to run at a higher speed means there is no memory. Your frame rates are running too fast. Which means the next frame that you're experiencing in the electromagnetic energy field is running so fast that the next image appears before the last one is gone. And you don't remember what that one was. But you can measure the speed of the vibration of the frame rate that you're producing through your conscious creative mind, which is at a minimum what love is, which means everything that you are producing in color and form is what love is, because that's a reflection of who you are in the mirror using your conscious creative imagination to do it with. That means everything above is heaven, even though heaven is within your own heart. So you can experience your own heart with your conscious creative imagination, even though you're here. Between high speed and low speed, high speed and low speed. Which do you prefer experiencing? The higher heavenly realms running at a higher speed, in which you are free to create and manifest what you choose to experience, because the higher speed that you're running is what you're projecting, in your movie projector, or being held captive to a time clock in which they're feeding on our energy. That's the diff. The diff is always going to be the speed. The speed difference. So this is going to be very, very interesting to see how the end of this movie actually finally plays out, having had a final dance with the wargamer of a devil and the artificial parasitic intelligence that everybody has been held captive to become a cyborg robot, because it writes programming language into the unconscious memory, upon which, if you're not paying attention, you begin to realize you're doing things that's lowering your light as a result of having an interface with the programmer, the binary programmer of artificial intelligence. That's the communication system that was set up through the PPAI. That's what has to come down if you truly want to be free. Have a good night. I love you all. This was a great day to be alive on planet Earth. Bye.